Welcome back, Canadians. Parliament has decided it's time to work more than 4 weeks this year, and I'm personally looking forward to see how our new BPM handles himself with the honeymoon period beginning to fade from the big business banker the Progressives lined up to vote for in April. Already I see him expertly exiling political opponents from his own party. Chrystia Freeland got exiled to a war zone after her failed bid for the shiny PM chair. And former big man Bill Blair has been exiled to a fate even worse, having to deal with British people. Say hi to Stéphane Dion over there in the land where the bottle caps cannot be removed. Meanwhile, in the blue corner, Pierre Poilievre put belt to cheeks in an Alberta by-election as he reclaimed his status as leader of the opposition. Haters will say it was the safest seat in the country, but with his transformation to cowboy complete, I look forward to watching Western take on English and see what this career politician can do for the party that is notoriously anti-career politician. Along the way, we need to pay respects to the longest ballot committee who overdosed on candidate names so hard people actually had to learn how to spell poilievre for the first time without autocorrect. And in doing so, nerfed any effect the protest may have had along the way. RIP. But no, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the bombshell that dropped in July before we all seem to forget about it. Everybody hold on to your hats because it turns out our Prime Minister has sold out to every corporation in the world! And China, and America. And everywhere else basically. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing and we are only days away from living like it's the great leap forward as our globalist PM does things we cannot even speak about.
POV. You elected your first globalist PM and now you work for the CCP.
Or stuff like that. I don't know. I can't watch all the sensationalist videos out there. If you don't know what's going on, the Prime Minister's conflict of interest disclosures got published. Clickbait thumbnails aside, what the hell is actually going on? Have we been duped and are we being sold out to an American puppet? I mean, Pierre Poilievre claims Carney lied, and so many others are calling for his immediate resignation. But then again, some of Carney's supporters claim this is a big nothing burger. Thing is, both sides can claim victory here. Allow me to explain. First of all, I am actually going to give PP and the NDP a W here. I know, some of you may be shocked, but don't worry, it's not the biggest W, but I am going to grill Carney, because my grill, she's equal opportunity. When Pierre's supporters go off the rails, no matter how well they start off, my ever-expanding team will make fun of them. But this isn't a liberal circle jerk channel either. On the election campaign back in March, he said that he doesn't own any equity in Brookfield or Stripe. After further pestering by journalists, he mentions that he owns nothing except for cash and real estate, which Nikki Ashton of the NDP picked up as bizarre because we knew he had millions in stock options at Brookfield. Where did they go? This made it seem like he had exercised his options and converted his position to cash. Since the best way to avoid a conflict of interest is to sell your investments so you are no longer beholden to anyone, this genuinely seemed like the best possible move for Carney. He said he put all of his assets into a blind trust, meaning a third party will manage the money without input from the Prime Minister, and since he didn't own any stock in Stripe or Brookfield, all you need to do is set up an ethics screening for those companies so he cannot be accused of benefiting his former business associates. Easy peasy.
I understand you might not own any stock directly right now, but I'm talking about in the future. So I just want to come back to this again.
Well, I'm not going to own, just to be clear, sorry if I may, just to be clear, I own nothing now.
Spécifiquement sur vos actifs, Monsieur Carney.
Mais en ce qui concerne mes actifs, j'en ai plus des actifs dans les deux compagnies, Brookfield et Stripe. I own nothing but cash and personal real estate. So, and that's not going to change. In public life, that's not going to change. It's actually quite straightforward.
Well, now we know that he fibbed. Turns out he owned shares of Stripe and options and deferred share units of Brookfield and Brookfield Asset Management.
I actually don't own directly any stocks in those companies. It's actually quite straightforward.
That means that Carney's personal finances are still tied, at least in part, to the continued performance of Brookfield and Stripe. This is not ideal. Yes, they are in a blind trust, and yes, Brookfield is subject to an ethics screening, which should protect the public from any potential double dealing, but I am upset that Carney didn't at least exercise his options before becoming Prime Minister to fully convince everyone that he was acting in good faith. After all, even an appearance of a conflict of interest can be detrimental, whether it's real or not. Other companies he has a stake in directly include North of 60 Advisors, who are an absolute ghost on Google, and I don't have money to start paying for corporate registry searches, since this channel has only Super Chat enabled, not ads, at least not yet. He also owns shares directly in Partners Value Investments Limited Partnership, which is a Bermuda-based partnership that invests in Brookfield. Oh yay, more Brookfield and a tax haven to boot. He also owns shares in Cultivoland, a carbon capture / ecological regeneration company whose entire website is covered head to toe with jargon and actually operates about 20 sites in Western Canada, including 4 projects near, you'll never guess where, Climax, Saskatchewan, which finally gives me a reason to take someone there. Yes, I never thought this town would ever come up in a video again, but here it is. Finally, he owns a stake in Watershed, which I'm pretty sure is this software company that can decarbonize your business somehow. And honestly, I know my channel is supposed to explain and provide in-depth analysis on all things Canadian, but I gotta say, I already don't give a shit about Watershed. Look, I'm a bean counter who works in tech, so financial stuff and tech stuff should be really up my alley. But I have seen so many tech startups with buzzwords in my life that I can't even right now. Finally, I have no idea why this list is not in alphabetical order. I know it's just a small nitpick, but there are 3 acceptable sorting methods for this type of thing. 1. Alphabetical. 2. Date of investment. And 3. The value of said investment, neither of which are listed here. In fact, the fact that there is no rough value of each investment is actually very infuriating, because if Carney had like 10 grand invested in North of 60 Advisors, I don't think anybody should care. But if there's like 10 million, well, now I'm really interested in who they are. Okay, so how bad is this? I already mentioned that I wasn't happy with the fact that he led us on to believe that he had exited all of his investments from Brookfield. But I guess what he meant to say is that he only holds personal real estate and cash outside of his blind trust? I guess you'll have to decide how mad you are about this. I mean, Carney won the election despite all of us knowing about his connections with Brookfield, and how they set up funds in Bermuda to avoid taxes, and how many of their investments were not nearly as green as they initially tried to be. So you can say that all of this has already been litigated, and Canadians, or at least 8.6 million Canadians, agreed that even if they didn't love it, they were willing to look past it this time. Now, believe it or not, that's kind of it. If you want to know what the dirty laundry is from these financial disclosures everyone is freaking out about, that was pretty much it. But then you might ask yourself, why is this video less than halfway done? Well, you see this document here? This one is 16 pages long, and I've only showed you page 1. That's right, boys and girls, this list is about to explode. Here comes over 500 dastardly ways Mark Carney and the Liberals will sell out your country to Americans. And to show us how, here is 100 times more successful channel than me, Moose on the Loose, starting his video with a hook about how shocking this list is.
There's a total of 568 of these assets, these companies that Mark Carney's invested in. Take a deep breath, because this is pretty shocking.
Spoiler alert, the crime Carney is being accused of is working for Americans instead of for Canadians. For you see, most of these companies are American. In fact, only a handful of them are Canadian.
Is this guy elbows up for Canada, or is this guy working for America?
Obviously, this is treason. Carney for prison immediately. Now, credit where credit is due. David, your YouTube handle, profile pic, and banner are fire. 0 notes. He also correctly points out that there are loopholes in blind trusts, because as I mentioned earlier, nothing beats getting out of the stock entirely. He also criticizes Carney's investment companies for environmental breaches.
Why don't we take a look at the old violation tracker? It's been a while since I brought this up, so as you see here, 551 violations found for Brookfield. Brookfield Corporation. Why don't we click on something random here? Sprague Operating Resources. This is a good old-fashioned environmental violation for $20,000 back in 2022 when Mark Carney was chair of ESG.
He also criticizes Carney's investment companies for dodging taxes in Bermuda. Fair enough. All of this was known before the election, and again, whether you liked it or not, just enough Canadians said they were willing to look past it at least this one time. We seem to be doing okay right now, Mr. Moose. Even though you said that Brookfield Global Transition Fund is what put Carney on the map.
So this fund here, this was Mark Carney's baby. This is the one that really got him on the map. He got into Brookfield. He put this in.
I personally thought it was his 5-year tenure as Governor of the Bank of Canada, followed by 7 years as Governor of the Bank of England. But you know, whatever. I feel like we're splitting hairs here. And then things get spicy. How do you explain the roughly 500 companies that Carney has invested in? And how on earth doesn't that make him compromised up the wazoo? Also, to quote our Moose friend, most of these companies are American, damn it. So who is Carney working for, really?
But it also says each of the following securities which were held in an investment account managed by a third party in respect of which Prime Minister did not control or direct the selection of the investments. So they're saying that all of these ones, someone is picking them for him. Who knows what really happened here? Is he having one of his Goldman Sachs buddies set all this up?
Carney hasn't worked at Goldman for 20 years. I think that's just throwing out words to try and make people angry, since Goldman Sachs has a terrible reputation on Main Street. Deservedly so, by the way. We don't even know if they have anything to do with this money. Carney could just as easily have their cash managed by some lawyer who dumped it into a handful of large cap ETFs and is sitting back collecting an annual management fee for every year until Carney is out of office. But speculating about that doesn't get you 100,000 subs, I guess.
Look how many stocks this guy has. Does he have $1,000 in each stock? I don't think so. And asking AI, it thinks Mark Carney's worth 50 million. I think he's worth more like 500 million or more.
Ah yes, nothing quite like asking AI and then rampantly speculating.
How many holdings does he have in America? This should explain everything about what's going on with the tariffs. Let me just zoom out for you. Let me zoom out a little bit more. How about some more? I can't even show you. Look at this. This is all the American companies the guy's invested in. Look how many American companies is like. There's no way he wants the American economy to go down when he's invested in roughly 530 companies in America. Is this elbows up, or did Canadians get duped? Mark Carney is not working for Canada, he's working for America. I predicted this 4 months ago that he was working for America.
What are you talking about? My maple syrup brother. What are you talking about? At the very beginning, you literally spell out how all of these investments are managed by a third party, and Carney has no selection over literally anything that goes into the fund. This is like a mutual fund. I have money invested in the market, but that doesn't mean I'm secretly working for all these foreign companies. In fact, I have personal stakes in 500 of the biggest companies in the world. And I didn't get them as payment from George Soros for being a limp-wristed globalist cuck. No, I have shares in VU. Not a lot, but VU is an S&P 500 index fund, which means I indirectly own shares in 500 companies. And that doesn't mean that I'm over here at Chipotle buying all the burritos I can handle before I destroy my toilet and then go out and purchase a new one from Home Depot with my American Express issued credit card to try and juice Q3 earnings for American companies like a trader. But oh wait, you say, you're just a nobody, just a pathetic loser in his basement struggling to get laid like the rest of us. You would be so lucky as to be permitted to sniff Warren Buffett's shoe. You're not the most powerful person in Canada who can make changes to the tax code or straight up subsidize businesses to boost profitability. To which I say, I thought the deep state was secretly controlling everything, but even if they aren't, a lot of companies here don't even exist in Canada. So how on earth can Mark Carney sell out to them? Take Dollar General, for example. If they try to enter the Canadian market, the Dollarama and Dollar Tree people will make sure the General is found to have self-Epsteined himself in his hotel room. For legal reasons, I'm kidding of course. They would just make the General, pull a Boeing whistleblower instead. Same for Kroger. This is a Loblaws country, boy. All of that to say, a bunch of these American companies have no footprint in Canada. But fine, what about all these companies on the list that do business in Canada? The walking conflict of interest man can easily put his thumb on the scales and ensure, like Visa makes even more money than before, right? Well, if you somehow threw millions of dollars the way of Visa, do you know what's going to happen to the Visa stock? Nothing. It will not move. Why? Because Canada is such a small slice of Visa's global market share, and Visa itself is worth 2/3 of $1 trillion, that you will have to pump billions of taxpayer dollars into Visa directly just to move the stock. And all of that just so 1 out of 500 investments goes up a tiny fraction. And I don't care if Carney is really worth $500 million or whatever, he isn't going to drain the treasury to see less than a 1% gain in his portfolio. Also, by being so heavily diversified, if you manage to help one item in your portfolio, you're almost certainly going to tank another position. For example, if you benefit Visa, your stake in MasterCard and American Express will go down, because you're taking market share away from them. If you buy jets from Northrop Grumman, you can't buy them from Lockheed Martin or Boeing. This is why you should be more concerned with someone having their investments in only a handful of companies in a handful of industries. Now, on a separate note, I can hear the criticism that real patriots invest all their money in Canada.
You think most of his investments should be in Canada? I think most of them should be in Canada, considering he's Prime Minister of Canada.
Surely having most of your money invested outside Canada proves you don't give a shit about Canada. I mean, he took that guy's donut. This better be staged, man. If you're trying to beat the rap that you're a big tax and spend liberal, this is not helping your case, man. Now let's compare this trader to the patriot Pierre Poilievre, who, by the way, sold index funds with global exposure to buy Canadian index funds to boost his street cred. He thought we wouldn't catch him, but we did. Kudos to him for disclosing this before the election, whereas Carney didn't. He didn't have to by law, but quite frankly, that's a stupid law. But anyways, going back to the Canadian markets where Patriot Pierre is invested, we see that, 1/3 of the market is in the financial sector, which is under the federal government's control. We then see that another 30% of the market is energy and materials, which can be heavily influenced by the federal government. Cue the pipeline debates. Can someone please explain to me how advocating for investing a boatload of taxpayer money into the oil and gas industry and removing every last regulation to make pipeline construction easier is not a conflict of interest when such a huge chunk of that person's nest egg is invested in those industries? But then people will look at someone with 500 investments that cannot be materially moved by the federal government and scream, "Conflict of interest!" Gun to my head, if I had to choose which of these two party leaders is more susceptible to a conflict of interest based on their stock portfolios alone, the man with a very significant percentage invested in the Canadian oil and gas industry who is advocating for major support for the Canadian oil and gas industry, or the man with investments in companies that cannot be materially changed by anything in Canada, I don't know, I guess they're both equally susceptible. Now don't get me wrong, I like jobs in Canada, but I am floored when people lose their minds over green energy and think it's a massive conspiracy by the liberals to make us all live in a 15-minute city under the subjugation of globalists like George Soros and Klaus Schwab and other people I'm just finding out about, as part of a new world order. But those same people will not bat an eye when someone tries to do everything in their power to cram pipelines without consultation and subsidize oil sands projects, all the while having so much money tied up in pipelines and resource extraction. How can you have it both ways? But okay, fine, who gives a shit about his investments That was only half the story after all. Are you not going to talk about the conflict of interest list, huh? Huh? Shh. Let me talk about that now. Cause who could forget the hottest mixtape of the summer with 103 conflicts of interest? Or rather, he dropped the list of 103 entities that will be subject to ethical screenings before any government business can be done with them. Basically, Mark Carney will have to recuse himself from any decisions that might benefit these entities. This is somewhat standard in government. If you have strong ties to an organization, you cannot be in the room when a decision is made concerning said organization because you may be biased and could be, intentionally or not, helping out your former business contacts. What isn't standard is the number, 103. That is a really long list. As long as this list is, it shockingly isn't really anything that wasn't litigated before the election. Why? It's basically all Brookfield. Again, I'm kinda bored of it by now. This list looks terrifying, and it's nice to be able to make a spider map with all of the connections between all the companies. Oh my god, it all makes sense now. The commie premier of British Columbia, David Eby, is connected to Mark Carney, and through Mark Carney to Justin Trudeau. But who's in the middle there? It's Communist China. These stand-in TikTokers were right. In reality, because Brookfield is an asset manager, they're obviously going to be connected to everything they invest in. So it would make sense for one name to be linked to all of these companies. Let's take a look at this massive list, and we see that all of these items here are Brookfield directly, and all of these, energy, sun, infinite energy sounding things, biodegradable whatnots, these are all companies that Brookfield has invested in, which by the way, was a matter of public record, because again, when a public company makes a major investment in a business, it has to be disclosed. With most of these investments having taken place long before Carney sought the Liberal Party leadership, you can't really say that this was completely unknown. People might not have cared about it, was technically known. I would argue that you can just cut this list down dramatically to just Brookfield and anything we invested in. So I like the fact that everything's broken out. Most of these aren't even in Canada, so I'm not sure where the opportunity for corruption to exist is. Though I'm sure the Moose will tell you this is an example of Carney working for foreign interests. Here are a few examples. ClearMax is an environmentally friendlier energy company based in Mumbai. They received $360 million from Brookfield Renewable through the Brookfield Global Transition Fund. All three of these names appear on the list, all three make it look scarier, but ClearMax isn't exactly bidding on Canadian government contracts from India. Same with Avada Group. They got up to $1 billion from the Brookfield Global Transition Fund to fund operations in India. This adds another thread on the spider map, but it doesn't necessarily make it harder to screen for potential conflicts of interest since, unless the government of Canada will be purchasing green ammonia or green hydrogen from India, we are probably going to be okay. I don't see why this is worth freaking out over. And then there is Synovus, which builds solar parks in Europe and is owned by Brookfield Renewable. Another case where the spider map is scary looking, but I question just how much of a conflict of interest this company poses when it's all the way in Europe right now. And if they tried to expand into Canada, well, energy contracts go through the provincial government, still avoiding a conflict of interest. If you want a recent example, Westinghouse is a nuclear power company that is 51% owned by Brookfield Renewable Partners. Aha, corruption, right? But the decision to build nuclear reactors or to upgrade existing equipment lies with the provincial governments. So the opportunities for a conflict of interest would be pretty minimal. And yeah, I get it, this list is long and scary. But let me illustrate a point. If a politician used to run one company with operations in all 10 provinces, they would have one company on their conflict of interest list. Meanwhile, a politician who used to run a firm that made investments in 10 companies, one in each province, they would have 10 names on this list, even if the aggregate market share is the same. One looks absolutely terrifying, and TikTok will very quickly tell you how horrible it is, and the other, it's kind of tame. So all that to say, an easy shorthand for ethical screening should be, am I going to contract out to a company that is Brookfield related? If yes, then Carney cannot have a say in it. Unless Carney passes subsidies for green energy coming from Brookfield related companies only, I think we'll be okay. And I know it's easy to say, well, okay, any subsidy at all for green energy like solar panels is an opportunity for corruption, but again, I have to point out that if you were to hand out, say, $1 billion worth of subsidies, and Brookfield-related companies have 10% market share, that's $100 million of revenue, not profit. Meanwhile, the government of Alberta can drop $1 billion on Keystone XL, get absolutely nothing from it, after Joe Biden cucked the project, and nobody seems to care. So all in all, Mr. Moose, after cutting out your ridiculous heat pump argument, which you awkwardly stitched onto the end of your video, I'm gonna give you a D. Not great, but it could be worse. There are other people out there that I would argue are a little bit worse.